So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got 40 clips on several different topics for what I think should be a really good show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary between the clips. And Bill Maher returned this week with some of those quasi-news political comedy clips I like to add to the mix. And as always, I'll be using clips from all the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the regular Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. I'll be covering several topics this week with some clips on the Ray Rice domestic violence tape controversy in the NFL and some clips on Hillary Clinton's possible run for the presidency in 2016 with her appearance in Iowa today, and even a few clips on this controversy about Fox News polarizing America that will include some short comment from Jerry Seinfeld, of all people, on Real Time with Bill Maher. But about 3/4 of the clips, like last week, will be on the escalating U.S. military action against the Islamic group ISIS or ISIL in Iraq and Syria, including President Obama's address to the nation last Wednesday and the beheading of a British aid worker just in the last day or so. And I'm going to start with an interesting discussion with a little political comedy in it between Bill Maher and Democratic Minority Leader of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi about why there aren't any real doves among the Democrats over in this clip.
That the Republicans
You
have.
said that the Democrats are not warmongers, but Joe Biden says we got to chase ISIS to the gates of hell. I don't see the Democratic Party sticking up for the alternative view. I don't see them being the voice that says, you know what, maybe we should sit this one out. Maybe we shouldn't have to choose between the guy with the poison gas and the people who behead you and put it on YouTube. Maybe we don't have to be involved in every war.
Well, let me just say that I agree with you. I think war is not a way to resolve conflict. I think.
What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
No, it only begets more war. But the fact is, if you're going to have a political solution, and that's what the president wants to have. That's why it was really important that he and Joe Biden be part of establishing a government in Iraq, insisting on a government in Iraq that would be reconciling Sunni, Shia, Kurds. If you're going to be doing humanitarian assistance, if you're going to be coordinating with other countries to have resolution in Iraq, you have to get rid of ISIS. You really do. Now, first time I was on your show was really early on, and I talked about my opposition to the war in Iraq at that time, going back many years. It was after we initiated, U.S. initiated hostilities, but at the beginning of your show. And the fact is, we've been burned by a government, U.S. leadership telling us that there were weapons of mass destruction, that Iraq had a role in 9/11, and the American people were burned by those misrepresentations. We knew at the time that they weren't true. I said the intelligence does not support the threat. So I'm very, very, very much opposed to any combat troops on the ground in Iraq, and I don't believe that Democrats or the American people will support that.
But it's okay if we smoke them from the air.
It's okay if we have targeted strategic strikes from the air to stop them in their tracks.
I'm okay with that.
And we accompany it with the humanitarian.
Oh, these people need to be smoked. There's no doubt about it.
No, but I mean...
No, it's not really that much of a laughing matter, I don't think, but I guess the reason it is that Democrats who think that it's okay to smoke the people from the air are considered doves in our system is because if you compare them to some of the most hawkish Republicans, that does seem like anti-war dovishness. And while that clip was a little bit amusing, what I thought was like outrageously absurd was a clip that I'm going to show you from Fox News Sunday where they had Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the most hawkish members of the U.S. Senate, along with his partner in hawkishness, John McCain, who I don't have any clips from today, but here you're going to see Lindsey Graham not only break Godwin's law or compare ISIS to the Nazis in a kind of ridiculous way. But literally by the end of this clip, you're going to see Lindsey Graham say, if we don't stop ISIS, they're going to kill us all. Right here in the United States, they're going to kill us all. I'm not making that up. You can see it for yourself over in this clip.
The first thing I want to tell the American people, from my point of view, it is our fight. It is not just their fight. This is a radical Islamic army that's pushing the theory of a master religion, not a master race like the Nazis. This is not about bringing a few people to justice who behead the innocent in a brutal fashion. It's about protecting millions of people throughout the world from a radical Islamic army. They're intending to come here. So I will not let this president suggest to the American people we can outsource our security, and this is not about our safety. There is no way in hell you can form an army on the ground to go into Syria to destroy ISIL without a substantial American component. And to destroy ISIL, you have to kill or capture their leaders, take the territory they hold back, cut off their financing, and destroy their capability to regenerate. This is a war we're fighting. It is not a counterterrorism operation. This is not Somalia. This is not Yemen. This is a turning point in the war on terror. Our strategy will fail yet again. This president needs to rise to the occasion before we all get killed back here at home.
All right, so
yeah, I wasn't making that up. He did say that if we don't put U.S. ground troops into Syria and Iraq, that combat troops, I guess he's saying that they're going to come here and kill us all. You saw it yourself there. Now, I also want to show an interesting clip. This is a reporter from CBS, from NBC, Bill Neely, was actually reporting from Damascus this morning. And the interesting fact that he added to this debate is someone who is in favor of U.S. airstrikes in Syria. Turns out the Syrians, the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad, or at least his people, his foreign minister, I think is who is being quoted, although he's not quoted by name, but I saw another clip that made me think it's the foreign minister who's saying, we want U.S. airstrikes in Syria as long as they're coordinated, as you can see over in this clip.
Assad's men welcome U.S. airstrikes, but they say they want those strikes coordinated with them so that U.S. warplanes aren't shot out of the sky by Syrian warplanes. Those Syrian warplanes have been in action just behind me on the edge of Damascus this morning, attacking not ISIS positions, but another rebel group allied to al-Qaeda. So, as you say, we've had the rhetoric from President Obama. Now comes the reality of those difficult choices. The killing of a hostage is designed to put pressure on President Obama, and he does face some hard choices now. When does he take action here in Syria, and where does he strike ISIS? Who are the moderate rebels who might retake the ground after U.S. airstrikes? So certainly pressure on President Obama now to deliver on intentions here in Syria.
So yeah, that was the NBC reporter Bill Neely talking about how apparently the Syrian government is not opposed to U.S. airstrikes within their territory. I don't know exactly how that's going to work out. But I also want to show you a couple other of the news reports. This one's from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their reporter Alex Marquardt, who I've showed several times, he's reporting, I think he's actually in Beirut for this report. And he's talking about the recent news about the beheading and then generally about Secretary Kerry's attempt to build a coalition. And I'll talk about that a little more after you see that clip over here.
Good morning, Martha. The brutal murder of British aid worker David Haines has been called by Britain's Prime Minister an act of pure evil. ISIS says it's retribution for Britain joining the American-led coalition against the militant group, a growing alliance that the U.S. has been working on intensely for most of the past week to confront the ISIS threat. David Haines had only been in Syria for a few days, helping deliver aid to a refugee camp when he was kidnapped early last year. This weekend, ISIS released a grisly video of the 44-year-old's beheading, a warning, they said, to the allies of America. This latest chilling tape comes as the American military assault against ISIS grows. So far, 160 airstrikes against targets in Iraq. A campaign the U.S. now wants to expand with the support of not just Western allies, but regional friends as well. like Saudi Arabia, where Secretary of State John Kerry told me that he and the president want the largest coalition possible.
Because the bigger it is, the more effective it is, the faster we can eliminate the threat.
While some have eagerly signed up, others have been more reluctant. Egypt said on Saturday it supports the mission, but didn't say whether it would contribute. Turkey has been the biggest gateway for foreign fighters into Syria, but wants to stay behind the scenes. And as ISIS faces an international assault, its ranks are growing. A new CIA estimate says ISIS now has between 20 and 32,000 fighters. That number is only growing by the day, and so far, despite those U.S. airstrikes, ISIS has managed to hold on to most of the territory it has taken in Iraq and Syria. Even once this international coalition is finalized, the Obama administration admits it will take years to defeat ISIS, a war that will almost certainly be handed off to the next administration.
So there are a lot of interesting facts, I think, in that report from Alex Marquardt. You saw that no one other than the United States is actually committed to any military action, never mind troops on the ground. I don't think anyone's even committed to airstrikes, although it seems like perhaps we'll be getting some assistance from the British after this, or from the UK after the beheading of this British aid worker over the weekend. And ABC also had a report from London, from Parliament. Their reporter, Hamish McDonald, talked about how this latest news may very well bring Great Britain into the war more in a military way, over in this clip.
Hamish, does this make it more likely that the British will get involved in military strikes with the U.S.?
Well, Martha, they certainly haven't committed to that formally yet, but David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, is saying that they are ready to take whatever steps necessary as this strategy against ISIS intensifies. He's also using really the strongest language possible, referring to this video and the beheading as callous and brutal. He says that ISIS are the embodiment of evil, and that these people are not Muslims, they are in fact monsters. Of course, the British government has been fully engaged with this from the beginning, given that the man who appears in the video does seem to have a British accent. He's thought to be one of many British jihadists fighting in northern Iraq and Syria. But now to a British victim. That means that the government here is fighting against ISIS on the home front, the rise of fundamentalism in Britain, but also internationally. Perhaps a significant development here today, given that some senior Islamic clerics have declared a fatwa against any jihadists who want to go and fight with ISIS. They say that they're heretics. Martha?
So that was the ABC report from Hamish McDonald, their reporter in London, and there was actually a more extensive report over on CBS from their reporter Charlie D'Agata, who also reported from Parliament and included a long clip of British Prime Minister David Cameron. I know I have some long-time viewers in Great Britain, so here for my viewers in the UK. A longer report from CBS is Charlie D'Agata with a longer clip, or a significant clip from David Cameron explaining his position on this latest news.
Good morning, Bob. This morning, British Prime Minister David Cameron called an emergency meeting in 10 Downing Street to discuss the crisis. Afterward, he praised aid worker David Haine, calling him a British hero, and said that the British government would not back down in its fight against ISIS.
We are a peaceful people. We do not seek out confrontation, but we need to understand we cannot ignore this threat to our security and that of our allies. There is no option of keeping our heads down that would make us safe. The problem would merely get worse, as it has done over recent months, not just for us, but for Europe and for the world. We cannot just walk on by if we are to keep this country safe. We have to confront this menace. Step by step, we must drive back, dismantle, and ultimately destroy ISIL and what it stands for. We will do so in a calm, deliberate way, but with an iron determination.
The hostage crisis isn't over yet. There was a second British aid worker that was shown at the end of that ISIS video with the threat that he too would meet the same fate unless the British government stopped its support of the U.S. military in the region. Bob?
So that's the CBS report on the British reaction to this beheading of their aid worker over the weekend. And this was reported, of course, on all the big five corporate outlets. I'm not going to show you the whole Fox News report from Amy Kellogg on the same subject, but they covered this quote from President Obama. First, I'm going to show how they covered David Cameron's reaction, Prime Minister of Great Britain, but then they also showed how President Obama reacted to the beheading of this British citizen, and he used a very strange phrase, or at least under the circumstances, that I will tell you why I think it's strange after I show you that quick Fox News clip over here.
Now, as soon as the news broke late last night, British Prime Minister David Cameron rushed back to 10 Downing Street. He called Haynes's killing a despicable and appalling murder of an innocent aid worker. President Obama issued a statement last night as well, expressing outrage at Haynes's killing, adding the U.S. stands shoulder to shoulder with our close friend and ally in grief and resolve. And John.
Now, what I thought was interesting about that was the use of the phrase shoulder to shoulder regarding beheadings, because I know that if the White House is going to put out a statement like that, that they pick their words very carefully. And when I hear the word shoulder to shoulder, when I think of we have our U.S. beheading victims and their British beheading victims, when you think of them being shoulder to shoulder, it really brings up an image of the beheading for me. And I don't know what you think. You can tell me in the comments section. But as one piece of evidence that this is a chosen phrase that the White House really wants to put out there, one of the guests who was on all 5 shows, or the only guest who was on all 5 shows, was White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough. And I noticed over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, when he was talking to Martha Raddatz, he used that same phrase, shoulder to shoulder, and not only did he use it, but he started to say side by side, and then he corrected himself and used the phrase shoulder to shoulder, which I think is evidence that the White House has chosen this phrase specifically, and the only reason I can think of is because it brings up this image of beheadings. But I don't know, you can tell me what you think, but here's my second piece of evidence on that. Denis McDonough almost saying the phrase side by side and correcting himself by saying shoulder to shoulder over here.
Keep the heat on ISIL.
Do you think this will mean that the British will now join in airstrikes with the U.S.? Does it strengthen the coalition?
We obviously underscored to stand shoulder to shoulder with our ally and our close friend, the UK. Exactly what form that takes is going to be something that will develop over the next
do you?
So, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I think that phrase shoulder to shoulder is a very weird one to use when you're talking about beheadings. And there's another piece of weird information that I saw on the Sunday morning shows in the interviews with Denis McDonough. He, like I said, he did the full Ginsburg on all the shows. And Chuck Todd asked him about this recent poll that was talked about on NBC's Meet the Press. And the weird thing about it is that in this poll, 62% support President Obama's strategy against ISIL, but then, let me get the number right here, 68% think that the strategy won't work, which isn't that like some sort of weird contradiction? I don't know. So Chuck Todd asked White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough about that, and you can see his answer over here.
We've got some polling that we're just releasing this morning. 62% of the country supports what the president wants to do, and 68% don't believe it will work. Why do you think that the public is supportive but skeptical that this will work?
Well, look, this is obviously a complicated effort, and that's why the president is going about this in a very painstaking and very prudent fashion. That's why the Secretary of State is now just continuing his efforts to travel throughout the region to get others to join us in this effort, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to lead an international effort against ISIL. But this is not going to be easy.
What does success look like?
Success looks like an ISIL that no longer threatens our friends in the region, no longer threatens the United States, an ISIL that can't accumulate followers or threaten Muslims in Syria, Iran, Iraq, or otherwise. And that's exactly what success looks like.
He held up.
So I thought Chuck Todd from Meet the Press bringing up that poll number with Denis McDonough, that was kind of an interesting question, and that contradiction in the poll, I don't even know what to make of that. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And I want to show another question that Chuck Todd asked Dennis McDonough over on NBC's Meet the Press this morning, kind of about the contradiction between how the White House about a year ago was asking for congressional approval to take military action in Syria, but now in President Obama's speech on Wednesday, he said he would welcome congressional support and congressional authorization, but they're not necessarily going to seek congressional authorization. And so here's how White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough explained that contradiction to Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press this morning in this clip.
Vote in Congress very quickly. The president has said about his plan for ISIS, he wouldn't mind if Congress weighs in, but that he has the authority.
He didn't say he wouldn't mind. He said he'd welcome it.
He'd welcome it. Fair enough. That's a different way of phrasing, I think, the same way. But a year ago, he said he needed Congress behind him before he took any action in Syria. And this time he just simply welcomes it. But if they don't do it, he's going to do it anyway. Why the change?
I'd say three things about this, Chuck. One, I came on this show almost exactly a year ago to warn about the threat of Syrian chemical weapons. Earlier this summer, we succeeded in destroying the declared Syrian chemical weapons stockpile, which theretofore had been one of the world's biggest. That's point one. Point two, when I came on the show a year ago, we did not have any statutory authorization that would underscore our effort to take the fight to Syria because of the chemical weapons. That's why and by the way, it would have brought us into the middle of a civil war in Syria. We decided that we needed Congress to help us with that. Now we have a situation where with a 2001 authorization, we have statutory authorization.
It's funny that you want to use this authorization to do this, and you also want to change the authorization. Are you still going to pursue changing that war authorization, rescinding it, and having a new one, or are you delaying that push?
This has been something we've been talking to Congress about. We'll continue to talk to them about it, but that's something that...
But this is now in the back seat. You're sort of punting that.
This is something we've been working with Congress. We'll continue to work with Congress on it.
So I think that the distinction that Denis McDonough made between going into Syria last year against the Syrian government and now going against ISIL in Syria, where they're actually a threat, they're an al-Qaeda related threat, even though they were kicked out of al-Qaeda, which gives them some possibility of claiming they can be authorized under the 2001 authorization for use of military force against those who attacked us on September 11th, Al-Qaeda and associated groups. And there's a really broad authorization from, I think it's September 14th, 2001, like a few days after the September 11th attacks. And then also the authorization for use of military force in Iraq. When was that? 2003, when Congress gave George W. Bush that authorization. So both those authorizations give a little more cover to the Obama administration for attacking ISIL since it's in Iraq and because it's associated with Al-Qaeda or sort of associated with Al-Qaeda. But I also want to show you this report from ABC's Jeff Zeleny kind of on this whole issue of whether Congress needs to give authorization, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip over here.
I know there's a lot of people around here say they don't want to deal with it before the election. Are you kidding me?
Tell the American people the truth, Mr. President.
This is a counter-terrorism mission.
The uncertain politics of the ISIS debate coming to a boil on Capitol Hill. The sharpest skepticism from President Obama's closest Democratic allies, like Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia.
Why do you think it's a mistake for the president not to be asking for congressional authority here?
It's Congress that declares war, Congress that initiates war. If we're going to ask people to risk their lives, then we ought to be willing to do the work to reach a political consensus that the mission is worth it.
The president insists he can order airstrikes in Syria without congressional approval. But it's this request sparking the most debate.
Give us additional authorities and resources to train and equip these fighters.
Concerns about arming Syrian rebels go well beyond the $500 million price tag, with questions of just who these fighters are and who they're loyal to.
We're going to pick a side or try to pick a side. And the same as we did when we went into Iraq, same as we've done in Afghanistan, and that hasn't worked well for us.
It's blurring partisan lines, with Republicans showing rare signs of backing the White House.
Is this being rushed through too quickly? Shouldn't there be more of a debate?
This is a very serious issue and ought to be handled that way. And frankly, we ought to give the president what he's asking for.
Democrats aren't so sure. Senator Mark Begich is facing a tough re-election bid in Alaska.
He is at it again.
His constituents worry about the cost and fear the U.S. will slip into another long war.
They're concerned that we would once again get engaged in a quagmire there and pick up the tab for who knows what over the long term.
The challenge for the White House is getting enough jittery Democrats on board without scaring off Republicans. For This Week.
So, yeah, you can see from that report from ABC's Jeff Zeleny that it's actually more likely for President Obama to get Republican support for congressional authorization for action against ISIL in Iraq and Syria than it is to get Democrat support. Kind of relating back to that clip I showed at the beginning, that Democrats are kind of dovish if you compare them to the Republicans. And I also want to show a specific Democrat, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, was over on CBS's Face the Nation. And the more I see her talking, she's on this book tour talking about, among other things, how sexism has affected her and sexism in the Senate. I'm going to show a clip from her on the whole Ray Rice domestic violence tape and NFL controversy in a little bit. But here's Kirsten Gillibrand saying that she is basically to the left of President Obama on his policy on attacking ISIL, and also that she thinks there should be congressional authorization over in this clip.
And she definitely wants Congress to vote on airstrikes into Syria.
It is appropriate to ask for Congress's approval for certain military actions, and he is going to do that. We will be able to debate what that request is. Certain strategies I don't support. I don't think arming the rebels in this instance is necessarily going to be productive. We spent years training the Iraqi forces, the Iraqi police forces, the Iraqi military forces, and ISIS was able to cut through them like butter. But there are things that he is asking our support for that I do support. I do think this multilateral engagement is wise. It has to be participations by Sunnis, by Muslims, by Arabs all across the Middle East. And if he continues to form a coalition to deal with this serious terrorist threat, that is the right approach.
So, yeah, that was all very reasonable. I like what I heard from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand there. And one of the things that has kind of annoyed me, if talking about Bob Schieffer's Face the Nation there on this whole ISIS issue, is that Bob Schieffer has seemed to be really hawkish on it. I've shown several clips over the last several weeks showing him to be hawkish, and one of those I want to show now is he also interviewed White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough, and he asked him about his guest from last week, Henry Kissinger. I don't think I showed any Henry Kissinger clips, but last week. But one of the things Henry Kissinger said is that he would have had like a strong response in the first 72. He's like, basically, I would carpet bomb ISIS like we did in Vietnam. Or I'm sorry, it's a very bad Henry Kissinger impression. But you can see Bob Schieffer asking Denis McDonough, like, basically, why didn't we carpet bomb ISIS like Henry Kissinger would have done in Vietnam? Well, that's not exactly what he asked, but you can see the actual question over here.
You know, Henry Kissinger was on this broadcast last week, and he said that had he been there, he would have recommended a very strong reaction for 72 hours and then step back and say, what is our long-term strategy? Do you feel that we have gotten these people's attention here?
There's no question we have their attention. And here's, let me remind you why the president chose the path he chose. The reason the Iraqi security forces melted away in the face of the ISIL threat in places like Mosul earlier this year is because a long-time perfidious erosion of politics in that country, where the prime minister focused on his ethnicity and his sect rather than on the whole country. We thought it was very important to get him out of that job, get a new prime minister, and get a multi-ethnic government shaped and ready to go. That's what we have in Baghdad. That's step one in a process that will allow us to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
So then having shown that clip of Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation asking a kind of hawkish question, you know, why didn't we bomb them? You know, or he didn't actually say, why didn't we carpet bomb them like we did in Vietnam? But it was pretty close to that, especially with the Henry Kissinger reference. And then the next clip I want to show from Bob Schieffer on Face the Nation in his interview with Denis McDonough, he also said that this latest beheading video from the beheading of this British aid worker proves that ISIS is a threat to the United States, which I actually think it kind of proves the opposite, that they're showing these videos of beheading people, Americans, and then this British citizen over there because they can't, or at least immediately can't attack us here, because they're basically doing everything they can, in my opinion, to get us to send as much force as possible over there. Airstrikes or even ground forces would be better, because they want to, from what I've seen of coverage, and I think I showed clips on this in the last several weeks, ISIS's big goal is to, in their view, humiliate the United States and Iraq like they did before. The U.S. soldier, the U.S. ground forces in Iraq, like they were humiliated and had to withdraw before. That's sort of their spin on what happened in the last dozen years between the U.S. and Iraq, I guess. And anyway, I don't think that this beheading shows that they're a threat to us. I think it shows that they aren't a threat to us, because that's all they can do to try to goad us into action. But here you can see Bob Schieffer saying that this latest beheading proves what a threat ISIS is to us, in his question to Denis McDonough, who kind of has a more reasonable response in this clip.
And ultimately destroy ISIL.
Seeing this video yesterday leads me to believe that if we ever had any doubt about these people posing a threat to the United States, these videos would remove that. Are they a threat to our national security?
There's no question that they're a threat to our national security. What we have said is that we are not aware of any credible threats to the homeland right now, but we are concerned about three things in particular. The fact that they now control territory, and that gives them place to plot and plan. The fact that they are now getting not only new fighters, but increased money and followers and adherents. And third, and perhaps most importantly, we're worried about the number of foreign fighters that are going into Syria to fight. Some of them may then become even more extreme and want to return to their home countries, be that in Europe or even in the United States, God forbid, to carry out their terrible acts. We're going to make sure that does not happen by sharing information with our partners, by keeping the pressure on our partners to not allow people in and out of Syria, and to make sure that, as the President will do later this month up in the United Nations, that we have the tools to stop that kind of travel.
So I showed a couple clips there of CBS's Bob Schieffer asking kind of hawkish questions to Denis McDonough that assume the threat from ISIS and the need for this military action. And now I want to show a clip from CNN's State of the Union. This is Candy Crowley, the anchor of that show, sort of assuming the opposite in her interview with Denis McDonough, asking him about whether our U.S. military action is going to have blowback and increase the chance of a threat to the United States. So it's kind of the opposite perspective, which I'll talk about a little more after you see the clip here.
About blowback, which is the other thing that people are worried about. U.S. force used in the Middle East has always seemed to arouse and radicalize other people, that there may be a chance here that while trying to destroy ISIS, you create other terrorists that come in and take up the fight, that you will make more enemies than you will kill.
Look, our strategy needs to be carried out in a disciplined, thoughtful fashion. That's exactly what we'll do. That's also why it calls for a coalition to include our Muslim partners from the region involved in this fight, because this fight is as much theirs as it is ours. This is a fight within Islam, within Sunni Islam, and they want to make sure that they do this. But I want to just be clear about one thing. We've been reminded again this morning of their inhumanity, of their depravity, of their barbarity, and the thought that we somehow could have made them more so is faulty. When you're confronted with evil, sometimes you have to confront it.
So I thought that was a good question about blowback. I'd like to have more questions like that. Less questions about how threatening ISIS is, and more questions about what the consequences of this military action might be. And I want to show another good question from Candy Crowley, where she tried to get an answer from Denis McDonough about whether we're going to get any ground forces from any of our allies, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. I showed Chuck Todd asking President Obama last week about a snarky email he got asking why we've given all this military aid to Saudi Arabia, but they won't use any military force against ISIS, which is really a threat to them in their neighborhood. And that's kind of similar to this question you can see Candy Crowley ask Dennis McDonough over here.
When you talk about, since you bring up coalition help and a big coalition, number one, in any of the conversations that the president has had, Secretary Kerry has, others have had, has there been a country that has said, we will put combat troops on the ground?
I'm not going to front run any announcements from any countries or from Secretary Kerry, who's in the region, or from John Allen.
Right, you don't need to name specifics. I just mean, has anyone said, yes, we will put...
Again, I'm not going to front run any announcements, but the president will be sitting down with John Allen on Tuesday morning. Secretary Kerry is continuing to work this in the region. He'll be testifying in Congress this week, and we'll make sure that we build a coalition that is durable, that is sustainable, and that is focused on the fundamental goal of this effort, which is to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
So I guess Candy Crowley didn't really get an answer to that question, but I think it was good of her to try to ask it. And actually over on Fox News Sunday, which Chris Wallace wasn't hosting this morning, he had the guest host was John Roberts, who actually used to work for CBS and I think even Face the Nation, if I'm remembering where he came from correctly. So he actually used to be a real journalist. Now he's over on Fox News, and I actually think he asked some good questions of Dennis McDonough. Of course, Fox News is never shy about confronting members of the Obama administration when they come on the show, and I thought John Roberts had a few good questions. The first one is about whether there will be any U.S. forces used in Syria, and not just combat troops, but whether there'll be any kinds of U.S. forces going into Syria. And Dennis McDonough also doesn't really answer that question over here.
That's the function they're carrying out.
And will there eventually be U.S. personnel on the ground in Syria?
The president made very clear to the country on Wednesday night that the ground forces in Syria will be Syrian opposition ground forces. That's why it's so important for Congress to enact that effort this week.
Understand the combat forces would be Syrian, but will there be American advisors, trainers, whatever in Syria at some point?
The president's been clear that the ground forces on the ground in Syria will be Syrian.
So can you say today that there will never be an American troop on the ground in Syria?
I can say today, John, exactly what we're doing, what the president's strategy is, and what I've just outlined, which is that we, using our unique capability, air power, ISR, and training and enhancing and equipping of those forces on the ground, will do our part, but we're going to lead an international coalition that includes Muslim and Sunni Muslim states taking this fight to ISIL. This fight is every bit as much theirs as it is ours.
So I thought that was a pretty good question, or a set of questions there from John Roberts trying to get answers about U.S. ground forces in Syria, and he didn't really get an answer because he said what he said was kind of ambiguous. It certainly didn't rule out special forces and covert operations, which of course he's probably not going to talk about anyway, because then they wouldn't be covert. But I also want to show what that Fox News can go a little bit excessive on their confrontational questions with members of the Obama administration when they come on the show. This next question from John Roberts, I think, is kind of simplistic. It's about basically the question is, it's about the beheading of the two U.S. journalists and then this British aid worker, apparently by this same British member of ISIS. And the question is, why can't we get this one guy with a knife and a camera, as if that's like all that's behind this whole campaign, when you saw that previous report from Alex Marquardt that there may be more than 30,000 ISIS fighters. So it's like some part terrorist, part army. I've shown clips in the last couple weeks about how a third of the ISIS leadership are actually former Saddam Hussein military officers from like the Ba'ath Party in Iraq from before the U.S. Invasion, and that's why they're so good at holding territory and coordinating on different fronts, because they actually have trained military officers. But that was kind of all reduced to, why can't you get this one guy with a knife and a camera on the Fox News Sunday interview of Denis McDonough by John Roberts over in this clip.
One thug with a knife and a camera basically is now terrorizing two nations. 2 American hostages killed, now a British hostage killed, another one being threatened. With all the resources at the president's disposal, and those of the United Kingdom as well, can you give the American people one reason why this guy is continuing to do this?
Well, we're obviously outraged at the behavior, and we've made clear our determination to make sure that we're taking every step possible to protect our people, and then to make sure that the long arm of American justice finds and brings to justice those who would perpetrate such actions. That's exactly what we're going to do here, John.
But that's kind of a long goal. What can you do in the immediate to get this guy? I mean, is there no way that you can go in and stop this guy from doing what he's doing?
I've said on your show before that we do what we say and we say what we do. Right. That's what we're going to do here.
Now, when you
so, I think the question there kind of was simplistic. Like I said, that ISIS isn't one guy with a knife and a camera, and of course Denis McDonough's answer there was also kind of evasive. And then I want to show one more question from John Roberts of Denis McDonough in this Fox News Sunday interview, and this is kind of in between. I think it's a real issue, but it also has something to do with like the right-wing echo chamber, or the right-wing media. One of the stories I've seen on the right-wing media a lot in the last week is that the family of one of the previous beheading victims, journalist James Follier, they're saying they were threatened by the U.S. government, saying that they might be charged with material support of terrorism if they paid a ransom to get James Foley back. And that's been kind of played up on Fox News. I've seen multiple stories on it. And so John Roberts asked Denis McDonough about it, and I don't know if you buy his explanation or not. I'll tell you what I think after I show you that clip here.
Yet we hear from the families of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff that when they met with the White House, they were told, don't you dare try to ransom your hostage, because you'll be prosecuted if you do that. And they're very upset about the way that the White House handled this. Why would the White House say something like that to them?
Boy, as a father myself, I can only imagine the very difficult circumstances that the Foley and the Sotloff family are going through. My heart goes out to them. My prayers are with them, obviously. In terms of what was communicated to the families, in the midst of many, many meetings over the course of this very difficult circumstance, we obviously made clear that what the law is. We didn't threaten anybody, but we made clear what the law is. That's our responsibility, is to make sure that we explain the law and uphold the law.
They interpreted that as a threat.
The third thing that's really important here is that we took every effort and will continue to take every effort to secure our people. That included an operation that has now been made public that the president himself said was risky and flawlessly carried out in a very daring fashion by our military. Hundreds of people in a multi-unit, multi-platform effort, which is something about which we're all very proud, but still haunted by the fact that we were not able to find our people and to rescue them.
Is there any way you can go back and try that again, or is the cat out of the bag now and you can't go back and do it?
So I guess it is kind of inconsiderate to point out to families who have hostages held by ISIS that paying money to ISIS could be prosecuted as a material support of terrorism. I could see how the families would see that as a threat, but of course it's actually probably accurate, and there are good policy reasons not why the U.S. government might not want the families to pay, to negotiate with terrorists and pay them ransom. So I could see why they might do that. So I'm not outraged. I can see why it's somewhat inconsiderate, but I'm certainly not outraged. Not like the right-wing media has been outraged about that story. And anyway, so I showed several different networks interviews of Denis McDonough. The next one I want to show is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, hosted by Martha Raddatz this week, and she interviewed Denis McDonough. She asked him something that actually, this question was asked several different places. I think I may have another one, but asked him about the Obama administration's changing stance on whether what they're doing against ISIS is a war or not, which I think is actually kind of a silly semantic argument, as John Kerry will argue in a later clip. That's the other clip I was talking about. But Here's how Denis McDonough responds to that question from Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week this morning in this clip.
The administration seems to be a bit confused about what to call this action. Let's listen to this.
We're engaged in a counterterrorism operation. I think war is the wrong reference term.
The United States is at war with ISIL in the same way that we are at war with Al-Qaeda and its Al-Qaeda affiliates.
We know we are at war with ISIL in the same way we are at war and continue to be at war with Al-Qaeda and its affiliates.
Sounds like some talking points there. Are we at war? Why is war the wrong reference term, according to John Kerry?
Well, this isn't talking points. This is obviously very serious business. And you heard both what John Kirby and Josh Earnest, and then Secretary Kerry, you'll hear more from him, I'm sure, as well. We believe that just as we have been at war with Al-Qaeda since the day we got here, we are at war with ISIL. And what does that mean? That means that we are going to use our unique capabilities in support of others on the ground, other Sunni. In Iraq, we're going to be obviously supporting the Iraqi security forces. And in Syria, we'll be supporting with air power the Syrian opposition that's on the ground now.
I want to...
So I think, like I said, the semantic argument is kind of a silly argument and about whether to call it a war or not, although I think Martha Raddatz did a pretty good job there by putting the clips together about how there was ambiguity or conflict between different statements of the Obama administration. I just don't think it matters that much. And I think the other question I'm going to show her asking Denis McDonough, which was a much more important question about why it is that these ground forces from Iraq are going to be successful against ISIS now when they weren't successful in the past. And but although Denis McDonough's answer isn't that bad, as I'll discuss after I show you that clip here.
Seen, and I have been there a lot, is those Iraqi forces ran the last time they were confronted by ISIS. They split apart and disappeared. We trained them for 8 years, and it didn't seem to work. Why do you think that'll work now?
There's no question that one of the reasons that happened was the intense sectarian nature of Iraqi politics over the course of the last many years. That's why the president was very discerning and very prudent in the use of our air power, notwithstanding pressure to do more than he did early in this summer, because he thought the first and most important thing we could do was to make sure that there was a new prime minister in Iraq. There is a new prime minister. That there's a new multi-ethnic government in Baghdad. There is now a new multi-ethnic government in Baghdad. They will support a unified, capable, multi-ethnic Iraqi force so that they can take this fight to ISIL. Ultimately, they need to do it for their success as well as ours.
Just very quickly.
Now, I don't think that's a totally bogus answer, because under the when Nouri al-Maliki was Prime Minister of Iraq, he expanded his role to, he was Commander-in-Chief, and he made himself the Secretary of Defense or Minister of Defense, or whatever they call it in Iraq, and he made all those institutions very sectarian, very pro-Shia and not meritocracies, and so of course it has a big morale problem when you're not really, especially the Sunni forces, in to the extent that they're in there. So if there's not a real nation, it's a lot, if you're not fighting for a real country, it's harder to get the troops to fight. So maybe if this new prime minister does have a more inclusive government and creates a sense of unity, it may increase the ability of the Iraqi army to fight. I don't know, but if it actually will, but I don't think that's a totally bogus argument. Speaking of things that are kind of bogus, before I leave ABC's coverage of the whole ISIS situation, I want to show one quick clip from Martha Raddatz with really poor phrasing. She had these two former counterterrorism experts from the Obama administration, one I think from the Department of State and one from, was it the Department of Defense? Anyway, and then when she was leaving, she made a comment that if you put the words together, the way she said them means something I don't think she meant to say, as I will explain after I show it to you. And there's sort of a tail end of this one counterterrorism expert. His name is, let me make sure I get it right, Daniel Benjamin. I think he used to be the counterterrorism expert for the Department of State, talking about the conflict in Iraq here?
Most likely outcome right now, but this is really about a conflict in the region.
And one that will be going on for a very long time, thanks to you both. Now, all eyes on Iowa. Hillary.
Did Martha Raddatz just say that this conflict will be going on for a long time thanks to you both? And is that really an appropriate thing to say to two former counterterrorism experts for the Obama administration? I don't know. I think it obviously was just a poor choice of words, but it just kind of struck me as odd, so I wanted to show that clip to you. And I think those are all my Denis McDonough clips. I told you he did the full Ginsburg and he was on all the shows, so I wanted to show you a whole range of interviews from him. John Kerry also was over on Face the Nation talking to Bob Schieffer, and I want to show a couple clips of that interview. Bob Schieffer asked him that same question about the semantic question about whether we're at war or not at war, and I think John Kerry is pretty accurate when he says that it doesn't really matter, but here's his answer in this clip.
Well, Bob, I think there's frankly a kind of tortured debate going on about terminology. What I'm focused on, obviously, is getting done what we need to get done to ISIL. But if people need to find a place to land, in terms of what we did in Iraq, originally this is not a war. This is not combat troops on the ground. It's not hundreds of thousands of people. It's not that kind of mobilization. But in terms of al-Qaeda, which we have used the word war with, yeah, we're at war with al-Qaeda and its affiliates, and in the same context, if you want to use it, yes, we're at war with ISIL in that sense. But I think it's a waste of time to focus on that. Frankly, let's consider what we have to do to degrade and defeat ISIL, and that's what I'm frankly much more focused on.
So I agree with what Secretary of State John Kerry said there about it being a waste of time to argue about whether you call it a war or not. Now, whether Congress has to declare war or at least authorize military action, that is not a waste of time. But whether you call it a war in your statements, that's kind of a silly argument. And I also want to show one more clip from Bob Schieffer. I kind of criticized his questioning before, but he did ask John Kerry one of the most important questions about the coalition, whether they're going to get more forces on the ground from some of our supposed coalition partners, because that's really John Kerry's job, going around the region, and you can see his answer to that question over here.
Well, Mr. Secretary, have you gotten any specific commitments for military help? For example, have you found anybody that's willing to put troops on the ground into this fight?
Well, we're not looking to put troops on the ground. There are some who have offered to do so, but we are not looking for that at this moment anyway. The answer is yes. There are some that have said that. There are some that are clearly prepared to take action in the air alongside the United States and to do airstrikes if that's what they're called on to do. What we're doing right now, Bob, is putting together the whole package. And it's not appropriate to start announcing, well, this country will do this country will do that.
Well, let me just ask you this. Going back to what you said you're not looking for troops on the ground. Do you really think you can destroy ISIL without troops on the ground? I mean, how does that work?
Bob, there are troops on the ground that don't belong to us. They're called Syrian. The Syrian opposition is on the ground. And one of the regrettable things is it has been fighting ISIL by itself over the course of the last couple of years. And it's one of the reasons that they've had a difficult battle. And now with the air support and other effort from other countries, they will be augmented in their capacity. And one of the things the president put in the plan is the effort to increase the training, increase the equipping and advising to the Syrian opposition. And I can't tell you whether some other country in the neighborhood will or won't decide to put some people in there. We know the United States is not going to do that. But as I say, this is a strategy coming together as the coalition comes together and the countries declare what they're prepared to do. But I want it to be absolutely clear out of this discussion we're having that every single aspect of the president's strategy and what is needed to be done in order to accomplish our goal has been offered by one country or multiple countries, and all bases are covered.
So he kind of said that there might be some efforts by coalition members, but he didn't really give any specifics. It sounds like there may be some announcements coming, and he mentioned how he's going to be testifying to Congress this week. I actually had the chance to meet my member of the House of Representatives who represents me from my district yesterday, and I actually had a chance to ask him about that very subject, about why it is that we've given all this military aid to Saudi Arabia, but they're not willing to use it for this problem in their backyard. And this is Ami Bera. I actually put a picture of me, a selfie I took with him on my Facebook page, facebook.com/LiberalViewer. You can see my selfie with Congressman Ami Bera. And he's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and will be questioning John Kerry this week. So I don't know, maybe he'll ask him that question. That would be kind of cool. But speaking of members of Congress, I want to show the positions of a couple additional members of Congress, or one I actually already showed. I showed Lindsey Graham at the beginning, and then I want to show actually the first answer Lindsey Graham gave on Fox News Sunday, where John Roberts gave a really easy question, like teeing up Lindsey Graham to give his criticism of President Obama, and the question is like, will the strategy work? And of course the answer is no. And he says this weird thing about a pony at the beginning. I've listened to this clip a few times, like John Kerry's speech had a pony in it or something. I don't even quite understand what that is, but maybe in the comments section you can tell me if you can understand what it is that Lindsey Graham is saying about a pony and his response to whether Obama's strategy will work in this clip.
Democrat. Senator Graham, let's start with you. Do you have any faith that the president's plan is going to work?
Not much. There's probably a pony in that interview you did with Denis McDonough, but at the end of the day, ISIL has to be encouraged by what was just said. When the White House tells the world we say what we mean and we do what we say, nobody believes that anymore. This is a turning point in the war on terror. We're fighting a terrorist army, not an organization. It's going to take an army to beat an army. And this idea we'll never have any boots on the ground to defeat them in Syria is fantasy. And all this has come home to roost over the last 3 years of incompetent decisions. So to destroy ISIL, what I was told or what I heard in your interview won't even come close to destroy ISIL. It's delusional in the way they approach this.
Senator.
Yeah, I think that's not the first clip I've shown of Senator Lindsey Graham calling the Obama administration's foreign policy delusional. He seems to like that word. And then I actually want to show another Republican, Michael McCaul, who's the Republican chair of the House Homeland Security Committee. And he was over on Face the Nation, and Bob Schieffer asked him that question about whether other Sunni nations in the region are going to contribute ground troops. And he actually made it sound like Jordan and Egypt might be contributing troops, although I don't know whether that's true or not. And I'll talk about that a little more after you see that clip over here.
Paul, the Secretary of State says we're not looking for ground troops. What does that mean?
Well, I think that's unwise. I do agree with the sort of strategy that we want the Sunni moderates, the Arabs, to fight the Sunni extremists. I don't think we want to put our conventional combat troops in the middle of a lot of this, although we will need advisors and special forces to guide airstrikes into Syria, which we have not done to date. Having said that, I met with the Prince of Jordan just 2 days ago, who said he is ready today to put his troops into Syria to fight ISIS. So I don't know why we wouldn't consider that option of all the Arab nations. And also I know he met with in Cairo with Egypt. They have a very strong military that we could try to advance the argument to put them in that area.
So I'm kind of skeptical as to whether Egypt and Jordan are going to put any kind of military troops or ground troops or any kind of military support for this action, but I suppose anything's possible. And then I also want to show Senator Jack Reed was over on Fox News Sunday, and he, after John Roberts asked that question of Lindsey Graham about, will Obama's plan work, then he turned it over to Jack Reed and said, well, what do you think about what Lindsey Graham just said? And Senator Jack Reed seemed to say that Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were going to contribute something, or at least that their contribution would be key to the success of the whole effort, over in this clip.
Senator Reid, some tough words there. What do you say?
Now, the president has proposed a comprehensive plan that recognizes this has to be ultimately the efforts of the local regional powers, particularly the Sunni government, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Republic, also the United Arab Emirates, rather, and Iraq particularly. And he is willing to use American air power and American training efforts to empower these countries. But it's their fight. As Denis pointed out, this is a battle within the Sunni community about where they're going, radical Islamist or
we know the plan.
moderate.
We know the plan, but will it work?
I think the plan has great potential to work. First of all, there is the U.S. forces, air power. Second, with the cooperation of the Saudis, we're going to be training, and it's going to be done by the Department of Defense, military personnel, Syrians, to go back into Syria. Lindsey and I both support that effort. Then we're going to be, hopefully, backing up the Iraqis as they start reclaiming their territory, putting pressure on ISIL to either to move forces back to Iraq to defend their territory that they've captured, or to pull back and let us take more Iraqi territory back. So I think the plan is the best possible one, because it recognizes this is not just a military struggle, it's also a political struggle.
So that was actually one of the best defenses of the Obama administration position I saw on the shows this morning, better than anything I saw from Denis McDonough, I think, because that was a lot less evasive than a lot of what I saw from Denis McDonough. And I want to show two more quick clips on ISIS before I get to the other topics that I have a few clips on. These two clips, I wasn't actually going to take any clips from this guest. This was over on NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd had James Baker, who used to be Secretary of State for George H.W. Bush, before he did the Operation Desert Storm that took Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, and then decided not to go on and depose Saddam Hussein. And I'm going to get to a clip on that in a minute. But the reason I decided to show two clips from James Baker is because he said two things that I just couldn't resist showing to you all, just because I thought were just kind of interesting. And the first one has to do with James Baker actually calling for a regional conference to solve problems in the Middle East, and that's kind of something I've been saying in videos since like 2007 or something, back when we were in the middle of the Iraq War, that there needed to be some sort of Congress of Vienna for the Middle East that redraws the map after the strange thing at the end of World War I, where England and France split things up in the Sykes-Picot Accord secretly, and it really didn't have anything to do with the needs of the native population. And of course, that's not what James Baker's saying. He wants more of the establishment going in to like keep order, not like breaking up borders. But I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip over here.
For this purpose, in the long term, the Middle East is mired in turmoil everywhere you look. And in the long term, somebody's going to have to organize a negotiation or a conference or something to deal with these conflicts, because these conflicts foment terrorism. And everybody in the region, every country in the region or in the world, for that matter, would like to see us take out ISIS. But after that's over, there's going to be more coming if we don't do this. We need to pull all the countries of the region together. We need to add the EU, Russia, China, and of course ourselves, and have a discussion and a conference and a negotiation over how we empower the moderate forces in the region, how we limit the extremists in the region, and how we do all of this without further inflaming the Shia-Sunni conflict.
Now that regional conference sounds a lot more like the original Congress of Vienna, which was, to try to redraw things as little as possible to keep the established order in power, the old regime or whatever. It's been a long time since I studied that, actually, but I would actually like to see a regional conference that's more based on like Wilsonian principles of democracy that didn't get implemented at the end of World War I that should have been implemented, where people get self-determination and democracy, but it has to be liberal democracy where they respect the rights of minorities, and that's one of the things that you have, one of the problems you have with democratic elections in some countries in the Middle East, like, what happened in Egypt, where the people who get elected then don't respect the democratic values, the liberal democracy where you respect civil rights and the rights of minorities. And then the last clip I want to show from James Baker, this is where he tries to say, he talks about how he advised George H.W. Bush not to depose Saddam Hussein because he didn't want the chaos that you see happen after George W. Bush went into Iraq. But then he tries to still blame the current chaos on President Barack Obama, and I don't think it really works, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you this final clip on the whole ISIS, Syria, Iraq situation here.
This right now. I know you've been asked this before. The Bush 41 administration chose not to take out Saddam Hussein. Right. Do you believe if you had, that basically the 90s would look like what we're dealing with today?
Well, we were afraid of that. That's why we didn't, for 2 years after we left office. Why didn't you guys take care of Saddam when you had the chance? Every time I'd go out and give a speech or something, I'd get the question. Well, now people see why we didn't. Because we were worried about this very thing happening, that there would be ethnic divisions and that the country would split apart.
And this is exactly what I'm. So Vice President, so I take it you don't agree with Vice President Cheney, who said this week again, if he had to do it over again, he'd do the Iraq War again.
Well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree that because they did the Iraq War is why we're where we are. I think you can make the same argument about Obama's failure to arm the Syrian opposition
earlier,
or not leaving a residual force in Iraq. You can argue all those things about the past. The problem is we have a huge issue here. What do we do about it going forward? There's no country in the world that could pull together the kind of conference or negotiation I'm talking about, except the United States of America. And we need to do that. Whether we can still do that or not, I don't know. When we put our coalition together, we had 500,000 U.S. troops on the ground. We had a specific goal within a limited time frame, kick Iraq out of Kuwait. And America was respected by its allies and feared by its enemies. We're not there anymore.
And by the
So yeah, that was kind of a final dig at Obama there, I think, at the end, about how we're not respected by our allies or feared by our enemies anymore, which I'm not sure that's actually true. And then that whole argument that George H.W. Bush didn't depose Saddam because he knew this chaos would ensue, but the chaos that ensued is actually President Obama's fault. I don't really buy that. And the residual force thing, I've covered that in previous LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundups about how we couldn't leave a residual force because the Iraqi parliament wouldn't pass the status of forces agreement that was necessary for us to leave the residual force. And anyway, I don't want to go into all that. And I've spent over an hour on this whole ISIS subject. I think that they were all important, interesting clips, or most of them were anyway. So I hope you enjoyed all those clips on ISIS. And I want to cover a few other quick topics. Actually, the last clip I'm going to show, I never even mentioned the topic of that, is going to be the constitutional amendment trying to overturn Citizens United and Ted Cruz's claim that it would outlaw Saturday Night Live skits criticizing politicians. But before I get to that, the two other subjects I want to talk about. First, a few quick clips on this Ray Rice video, the NFL player who was shown beating his fiancée in an elevator and dragging her unconscious. A while ago there was the videotape of him dragging her unconscious out of the elevator, and then more recently the video of him actually punching her unconscious in the elevator came out. And I don't want to go into all of that. I don't really like to cover the NFL. I can't say I'm an NFL or even much of a sports fan. But it did get a little bit political this week, and I think domestic violence and violence against women, that's a real important topic. But actually, the first clip I want to show is kind of a comedy clip. This is Bill Maher covering it and comparing it to police violence. And I was actually really ready for this particular joke, having lived in Los Angeles during the videotape beating of Rodney King, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that Bill Maher clip here.
I gotta say, the difference between the NFL and the police is when the cops get caught beating somebody on videotape, they just tough it out. Really? Seriously, if it was a cop in that elevator, they'd be like, nope, tape doesn't tell the whole story. No. Nope. He feared for his life. He thought it was Beyonce's sister.
And that's like sadly too true, I think. Not just the Rodney King beating, where those cops were first acquitted in a Simi Valley court because they said that they were, justified in all of those actions. And Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Missouri, and just shortly thereafter there was this other guy shot in St. Louis, Missouri, that was actually videotaped, and supposedly the cops shot him because he was wielding a knife overhand against them, and then the videotape didn't really back that up, but it kind of backs up what Bill Maher said there, that even when there's videotape, police will find some way to claim that what they did was justified based on self-defense. And I'm still hoping to make a edited, produced video on the topic of Ferguson, Missouri, and mass incarceration, and the new Jim Crow, and how our criminal justice system is really kind of a system of racial control that goes into that. But that's still a project that I'm working on, and hopefully maybe this week it'll get done sometime around Thursday or Friday. I think I thought last week it might happen, but I want to show a couple more quick clips on this Ray Rice domestic violence thing. First, Kirsten Gillibrand, back on CBS's Face the Nation, addressed the topic, and again, I thought her comments were pretty reasonable over in this clip.
Football league.
I think the way the NFL handled this was awful. It was outrageous. They had all the facts they needed. They had a player who admitted to beating his wife. They had video of him dragging her out of an elevator. There was nothing left to determine. That player should have been fired immediately. So we are now looking to the commissioner to enforce a zero-tolerance policy. But the broader issue, Bob, is this institutional support, this chronic institutional support, whether it's the NFL, whether it's the U.S. military, whether it's the college campus, where the institution gathers and surrounds their star player, their golden boy, whomever it may be, without any regard for the victim and survivors, without any regard for women. And, as I talk about in my book, it's about this larger issue. Are women being valued? Are they being valued by these institutions? And are they being listened to?
And I think it's true, there are some institutions in our society that cover up domestic violence. Of course, I also have sort of an opposite view on that, having spent some time as a public defender covering a docket where there were a lot of domestic violence cases, and so I defended a lot of people accused of domestic violence, and I actually had a problem with the way that prosecutors would keep prosecuting cases where they didn't have the testimony of the victim and they didn't have any other evidence. Not like this Ray Rice case where there's actually a videotape. It doesn't matter whether the victim testifies in that case, because there's all sorts of and also if there's injuries, medical evidence of injuries, you don't need the victim's testimony. I just had a problem when prosecutors would keep trying to prosecute when they had no evidence and the victim didn't want to testify anymore. But I don't know, maybe some people would even disagree with that position, but that's sort of my background as a criminal defense attorney. And I want to show one more clip on this Ray Rice issue, another female senator talking about it. This is on CNN State of the Union with Candy Crowley, Senator Amy Klobuchar, talking about being a prosecutor, prosecuting domestic violence cases, because before she was a senator, she was a prosecutor. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip here.
When I was a prosecutor, we had a poster outside of the door so everyone would see it when they came in. It was a picture of a woman beaten up with a Band-Aid over her nose holding a little baby boy. And the words read, "Beat your wife and it's your son that goes to jail." Twice the number kids that get in trouble on domestic abuse, that have witnessed it, that have seen it happen, then they're twice as likely to commit it themselves. So does the NFL, which holds these players out to young men all across the country, have an obligation here? Yes. I can't compare it to every other industry. I know in a lot of places, if they had a video like that, they would dismiss an employee without a doubt. However, they have this obligation when they are putting out their players as role models to set a different culture.
And the best thing about
So I don't know if someone is convicted of a charge of domestic violence, should they be fired if they're in a job where they're a role model? I guess that's the argument there. I guess there is some sense in that. I mean, I'm certainly not pro domestic violence. I don't believe in even corporal punishment on children. So just because I ended up defending some of the people charged with domestic violence as part of my job as a public defender doesn't mean that I'm really sympathetic to that kind of action. But I wanted to show those clips. It's a kind of important issue, especially domestic violence. It's actually one clip I didn't show was someone over on Fox News Sunday, a victim's advocate attorney named Wendy Murphy, said that domestic violence in the general population is actually more prevalent than it is in the NFL. I don't know if that's true or not. I saw it on Fox News, so who knows if it's true. But I thought I would leave you with that thought before I move on to the next topic I want to show you 3 or 4 clips on, which is the launching of Hillary Clinton's campaign for president to become president in the 2016 election. One thing that's happening today is she's appearing at this Tom Harkin steak fry, and first I'll show you a couple news reports covering that. First, the first one we're going to show is this is on NBC. Andrea Mitchell talked to a bunch of voters in Iowa, where this is the first caucus in the presidential primary season is in Iowa, and Hillary Clinton didn't do very well there last time around. She actually came in third after Barack Obama and John Edwards, and according to NBC's Andrea Mitchell, she may have some problems this time around because there are some voters who aren't sure she's liberal enough for them in Iowa, and you can see that clip over here.
From billboards to posters to campaign buses for the candidate in waiting, supporters are flooding the state. They are ready for Hillary's first appearance in Iowa in 2,446 days.
We'll do 6 for $1. How's that?
Yes, they keep track of details like that here. A key strategy targeting young people. But at the Smoky Row Coffee House in Des Moines, Clinton has her work cut out for her with some of the 20-somethings we caught up with.
I'm looking for someone that's a little bit more liberal.
Andy Duffelmeyer, a law student.
More on the edge of pushing some important issues like climate change and campaign finance reform and income inequality and things like that. And I'm not sure that Hillary is that candidate.
Carla Bromwell works for a nonprofit. When you look at Hillary Clinton, what do you see first? A politician? A woman? A president?
I think people see kind of the cronyism on Wall Street, and I mean her biggest supporters is Wall Street, and you know she's currently on the circuit giving speeches to Goldman Sachs, and I just feel like regular people might see that as something that they're not looking for anymore.
But Caroline Clausen, a college sophomore, thinks Clinton would get things done.
She actually wants to work across the aisle and make sure that something would happen if she were to be president, rather than the gridlock we have currently.
Last time, Team Clinton was stunned by the Obama forces. She even finished third in Iowa behind John Edwards.
I am so ready for the rest of this campaign, and
it still hurts. Here's how she describes it in her new book, Hard Choices.
The night of the Iowa caucuses when I placed third was excruciating.
Obama blitzed her on new media. This time, Clinton supporters are trying to catch up on social media and enlisting celebrities like Katy Perry, who posted on Instagram, "I told Hillary Clinton that I would write her a theme song if she needs it." Still, there's the vision thing.
I feel like I don't know who she is, and I do feel like maybe she's a little malleable in kind of a Mitt Romney sort of way.
But especially with women voters, would gender trump all?
I would love to see the first woman president, but it doesn't matter more to me than my progressive values.
And just in a few hours, this field behind me is going to be filled with more than 5,000 very enthusiastic Democrats. But the Hillary Clinton skeptics I talked to, they still want Elizabeth Warren. They want Bernie Sanders. They want someone to push her to the left. And Bernie Sanders is going to be here in Iowa later tonight at a separate event. Chuck?
And I'm going to show a couple clips of Bernie Sanders in a minute on another program, but first, having shown how NBC covered that and actually questioned whether Hillary Clinton was far enough to the left, I want to show how ABC's Jonathan Karl covered the same topic. He had several clips from Senator Tom Harkin, who's the retiring senator who holds this steak fry in Iowa every year. This is like the 37th annual or something, and he's been in the Congress for 40 years. And there's some of the same themes over in the ABC report, which I'll talk about a little more if you see that clip here.
Later today, Hillary Clinton will make what looks like her first unofficial foray into 2016 at the annual Harkin Steak Fry. This is her first appearance in Iowa in nearly 7 years. So why did she choose this moment and this event to make her big return to Iowa? We talked to the man who started the steak fry 42 years ago, retiring Senator Tom Harkin. It's an Iowa institution, the annual cookout and fundraiser that's been bringing out the biggest names in Democratic politics for years. I mean, you've had just about every Democrat who's had a serious shot at president come by here over the last quarter century.
Absolutely. We've had them all. Some made it and some didn't. Well, most didn't, obviously.
Yeah, most didn't.
Most didn't.
And today's event marks Mrs. Clinton's biggest foray yet into 2014 politics, as Bill and Hillary get ready to hit the stump in key midterm races.
She wants to focus on 2014 and how we can keep the Senate and elect some key people around the country. So she's going to be out there working hard.
So I mean, we're going to see them out more than the president for the actual candidates, right? I mean, the president's doing a lot of fundraising, but he's not very much in demand for a lot of these races.
Well, I think that's the correct observation. That's right.
The Clintons say their visit here is all about their friendship with Senator Harkin, who's retiring after 40 years in Congress, and not about 2016. But don't tell that to the Ready for Hillary super PAC with their already well-traveled campaign bus. To them, Mrs. Clinton's 2016 run has already started.
The organization, which is, of course, several million people, very much would like her to run, and if she chooses to, she's got an army ready to stand with her.
When Mrs. Clinton stood here at the 2007 steak fry, she seemed invincible. But when Iowa caucus goers gathered 4 months later, the one-time frontrunner finished a disappointing third. Liberals upset about her support for the Iraq War had found somebody else to rally around. Now Mrs. Clinton is once again looking unbeatable. But some Democrats still have their doubts. Some progressives a little unease with Hillary Clinton. I mean, is she going to be too hawkish on foreign policy? Is she going to be too moderate on economic issues?
We're always nervous about about people moving too far to the right. See, a lot of us believe the center ought to be moved back, that the center has moved too far right.
So where's Hillary on that commute?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think this is something that will be developed, and we'll find out when and if she decides to run. You know, what's her vision for America?
So you still have real questions about where she stands on those central issues.
I do, everybody. You know, I must be frank with you. I thought Barack Obama was a great progressive and a great populist, and quite frankly, I haven't. Some things that has happened that I haven't agreed with.
Now, I disagree with the last part of what Tom Harkin said there about thinking that Barack Obama was a great progressive. I was actually an early supporter of President Barack Obama. I actually donated to his campaign in February of 2007, so that would be the equivalent of this coming February and the 2016 election cycle. But I never really thought he was that progressive. I actually thought he was more of a centrist. I even made a video about it. You can see way in my Obama-related videos on my playlist. It's the first video. It's called like Obama Uniter, not Divider, because he's a bit conservative or something like that. But I also, like Tom Harkin, was somewhat disappointed. I thought President Obama would at least push a little bit in the left direction. You know, he was a constitutional law professor, and I was expecting him to be a little more strict about warrantless wiretapping and NSA spying and going after the people who tortured. And I was disappointed. Oh, and drone killing of U.S. citizens. There are all sorts of things that President Obama did that I was disappointed about, even though, unlike Tom Harkin, I didn't really think he was progressive. I thought he was kind of a slightly left-of-center, centrist pragmatist. But before I finish the whole Hillary Clinton thing, I want to show one more clip of Tom Harkin and then a couple of Bernie Sanders clips. First, here's Tom Harkin talking about who it is who might challenge Hillary Clinton to be a little to the left of her. He mentions Martin O'Malley from Maryland, and he talks about John Warner from Virginia, and also Bernie Sanders, I think, comes up at the end of this clip here.
Hope and new aspirations. She is a global figure.
But falls a little short of Tom Harkin jumping on her bandwagon at this moment. Tell me about the newcomers in the Democratic Party. Who is the new face of the Democratic Party? Who's out there that can take her on?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that different people will come to the forefront. I've had Governor O'Malley.
What do you think of him?
Well,
he's a liberal can certainly be seen as a progressive.
Been a great governor, done great things. He's certainly out there as a viable person. He's there. I think you may see one or two senators that might come up that might want to do something in this regard. I think of people like Mark Warner from Virginia. He'll win his reelection this year. Others that are out there that I think that might be coming up, younger New Democrats coming up like that.
You think it'll be a race, or is it a little bit of a done deal if Hillary decides to run?
Let's be honest about this. If Hillary decides to run, I think it's going to be very tough for anyone else. That's not to say they won't do it. They might. Some other Democrats may pop up, or you might get a Bernie Sanders, for example, as an independent, might pop up. I don't know. I think you may have people come to the forefront that maybe want to stress certain issues in a campaign. But I think if Hillary decides to run, I think it's going to be very tough for any Democrat to try to get ahead of her.
Now, that's probably true. That's why there aren't really any Democrats running against Hillary Clinton or waiting to see if she runs, because she'll be a very difficult opponent to beat. She has so much support amongst a lot of people. But, he talked about whether Bernie Sanders would run as an independent. I'm not going to show a clip of him answering questions about that on Meet the Press. He said he's still considering whether to run as an independent or switch, since he is an independent. Actually, he's a socialist, but he talks about whether he might switch to the Democratic Party and run against Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to show that clip, but I am going to show a clip of Chuck Todd asking him whether his criticisms of what's not being talked about are actually criticisms of Hillary Clinton. And you'll see Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont refuses to take that bait over in this clip.
I want to read something that was paraphrased to you. It says, "It is essential," Sanders said, "to have someone in the 2016 presidential campaign who is willing to take on Wall Street, address the collapse of the middle class, tackle the spread of poverty, and fiercely oppose cuts to Social Security and Medicare." Is it safe to say if you thought Hillary Clinton were doing that, you wouldn't be considering this?
Well, A, I don't know that Hillary Clinton is running. B, I don't know what she is running on, but this is what I do know. I know that the middle class of this country is collapsing. I know that the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider. I know there is profound anger at the greed on Wall Street and corporate America, anger at the political establishment, anger, by the way, at the media establishment. Right. The American people want real change, and I've been taking on the big money interests and the special interests all of my political life.
But you say you're separating out, are you separating out Hillary Clinton from this? If she were speaking more robustly on these issues, would you be thinking
Chuck,
about
the issue is not Hillary. I've known Hillary Clinton for many years. I have a lot of respect for Hillary Clinton. The question is, at a time when so many people have seen a decline in their standard of living, when the wealthiest people and largest corporations are doing phenomenally well, the American people want change. They want Congress. They want candidates to stand up to the big money interest. So let Hillary speak for herself. I know where I'm coming from.
Now that doesn't actually sound like someone who wants to run against Hillary Clinton to be the Democratic nominee, because you would expect someone who wants to run against Hillary Clinton to be willing to say something negative about Hillary Clinton. And Bernie Sanders isn't even a Democrat, so I'm not sure why he's so hesitant. But I want to show one more clip from him where Chuck Todd asked him if the Democratic Party was closer to Bernie Sanders or closer to Hillary Clinton, and he gave an interesting answer, which he said was shocking. I don't think it was actually shocking, but he talked about how there's a feeling across, a nonpartisan feeling about income inequality and the rich getting richer, and I think actually there's sort of a parallel between like the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement against Wall Street, and there's a little echo of that in Bernie Sanders' answer to the final Hillary Clinton 2016 clip I want to show, talking to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press this morning. This clip.
American democracy.
All right, you're headed to Iowa. I guess I'm going to ask it this way about the Democratic Party today. Do you think the Democratic Party is open to a progressive like you? Do you think the Democratic Party is closer to where you are or closer to where the Clintons are?
Let me shock you by saying this. I don't think it's just the Democratic Party. I think whether people are Democrats, moderates, or conservatives, there is a profound anger at understanding that the middle class is disappearing, that millions of people are working longer hours for low wages, that 95% of all new income has gone to the top 1%. Not just a Democratic issue. In Vermont, I get a lot of Republican votes.
Right. But I guess I'm going to ask you, where's the Democratic Party today? Closer to you? Or
I think anybody who speaks to the needs of the working class and the middle class of this country and shows the courage to take on the billionaire class, I think that candidate will do pretty well.
Bernie Sanders.
That may be true. Like I said, I think there is some parallel between the Tea Party, anti-establishment, anti-Wall Street feeling, and the Occupy movement. That's the right and the left. So there might be some sort of crossing party lines argument. I don't know if Bernie Sanders is really the best messenger, but anyway, those were interesting clips. I want to show you a couple quick clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher brought up this argument that Fox News is polarizing America, which I think is a little bit of hyperbole because they have like less than 1 million viewers a day, and this is like a 300 million, more than 300 million people in this country. So they're not really polarizing America that much. But I'm not going to show the beginning of his argument, but this is sort of the end of Bill Maher's argument, where he talks about how it reinforces this conservative need to have an echo chamber where they hear the same thing all the time, and that actually is kind of almost a definition of conservatism, where you want things to stay the same. And then you can hear the response from Republican Haley Barbour, complaining about the rest of the media and how Fox News is a antidote to the liberal slant in the media, and then a quick comment from Jerry Seinfeld over here.
But they completely
With all
turned
due respect,
out.
the opposite of Fox News is not really me. It's MSNBC, which does not get near the ratings of Fox News, because I think there is something in the conservative brain that wants to be hearing the same thing over and over and doing the same thing over and over. Liberals like different. Oh, there's a new restaurant. Conservatives are like, no, I go to the diner and I get the number 5 every day.
I think more accurately, I'm older than all of y'all. Those of us, including y'all, who grew up in the time when we had 3 networks and 2 big newspapers, and they all had the same message, same way. Fox News was the first thing to come along that gave a conservative point of view. And now, as you say, there are big networks that are very, very left. And I think there's a huge market in the middle of the United States. I think people want to hear common sense, straight talk, problem solving. They want people to get things done. But your point is the media has become as polarized as...
It's not as entertaining as hysteria.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we forget, Fox is...
So yeah, that's the beginning of that argument about whether Fox News is polarizing America, and I mean that whole thing about Haley Barbour saying that there's this, the antidote to the liberal media. I noticed down in the comments section while some of that was playing that one of my viewers here, Jimmy Jazz 332, was saying, "What liberal media?" And I kind of agree with that. There really isn't that much of a liberal media. It's just Fox News has found this niche of people who want this conservative echo chamber. And then also here's I like that comment from Jerry Seinfeld about it being hysteria. And then finally here's another clip from Jerry Seinfeld talking about how, and I don't really agree with this, that democracy is like exercise, that it doesn't really matter if it works because, and I'll show you that clip, and then it actually goes into Bill Maher's new rules and Jerry Seinfeld making fun of him for what he did on Friday, that I'll talk about a little more after I show you that clip here.
No sense of social. But that's what's great about democracy. It's like exercise. It doesn't matter if it works. It's just that you're doing that.
Innovation is great, and you want to hold on to that.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much, but it's time for new rules, everybody. New rules. You know new rules. All right. New rule.
The most impressive part of the show.
Really?
That you're going to go into a little stand-up act here.
Jerry.
And I'm going to sit right next to you. I have a stand-up act myself.
Oh.
And I'm not going to do it.
I may call you from the bullpen. New rule.
I kind of thought that was funny how Jerry Seinfeld was, and that's not the only time in the show where he made fun of Bill Maher for doing his whole HBO Real Time with Bill Maher show, and then going across they showed him going across town in Washington, D.C. to do a live stand-up special, which I also watched. I was going to show you a clip from that, but whatever. If you subscribe to HBO, check it out on HBO On Demand or watch it. I'm sure they're replaying it. I thought it was definitely worth watching. And then the final clip I want to show for you tonight, having shown you those interesting ones on Fox News and whether it's polarizing America, is this is from back on ABC. You know how they do what's trending on Facebook? Well, what they did this week was the constitutional amendment that was from Tom Udall in the Senate to overturn Citizens United and Ted Cruz's claim that it would outlaw political satire on Saturday Night Live, which I'll discuss a little more after I show you this last clip over here.
Watching SNL tear up the campaign trail. But could these political comedy skits become illegal? Senator Ted Cruz says yes, if supporters of campaign finance reform get their way.
Lorne Michaels could be put in jail under this amendment.
In its Citizens United ruling, the Supreme Court allowed unlimited corporate contributions to campaigns, calling it free speech. But this week, Democrat Tom Udall pushed a constitutional amendment to change that. It would allow Congress and states to restrict campaign spending. Cruz helped block the bill, claiming those rules could limit corporate-owned TV networks from political speech, like comedy skits. Democrats say Cruz is way off base. So would campaign finance changes really kill campaign comedy? And is the Citizens United decision here to stay? Let's take a look.
Well, that wasn't very accurate. I noticed that they said that Citizens United allowed corporate contributions to campaigns, and actually it only allows independent expenditures where corporations can spend money or corporate money can be used to promote messages that incidentally help campaigns but aren't, they're not supposed to be coordinated with the campaign. So that wasn't actually even an accurate description of what Citizens United did, and I don't think it was even an accurate description of the constitutional amendment. I actually covered this in my LiberalViewer First Wednesday Live Q&A about 10 minutes into the program. If you check that out on my channel, if you want to know more about my position on why the amendment to overturn Citizens United actually would impact a lot of speech. I don't think it would criminalize Saturday Night Live, because there's actually an exception for freedom of the press, and NBC could probably claim freedom of the press, but it actually would affect a lot of other campaign spending. So check that out if you're interested in why the constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United is not a good idea. At least Tom Udall's amendment would be a bad idea for First Amendment freedom of speech. I'm way over time. I started late. I have to finish up the program, but I appreciate I had more than 120 people watching. I was reading your comments through. They kept me company and gave me ideas. I think I read off one during the show. So thanks for all of you who helped me out by watching it live. And if you're watching it as a recorded show, let me know what you think about the clips I picked out for you. I hope they left you a little more informed about the news, ending your weekend a little more informed, or for my viewers around the world, starting off the beginning of your week with a little more information about what the corporate media thinks is important here in the United States. And thanks for joining me. Watch out for LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, or as soon as I can get the show started, I guess. And I guess I'll be seeing you all around the internet.